They came at dawn, 3 men, fake uniforms, boots, crunching through my vineyard like they owned the place. I watched from the ridge, hands deep in my pockets, heart hammering against my ribs, trying not to breathe too loud as these strangers marched right up and started measuring, photographing, leaving a citation on my gate. Said I was in violation. Me, Ethan Mercer. You want to know what's funny? I used to investigate fraud for a living. Now I grow grapes on 5 acres. My father left me land that sits way, way outside any homeowner association boundary. Or so I thought. But Greg Lawson, the new HOA president, he wanted my land, and he wasn't shy about the ways he'd go after it. Lying, intimidation, twisting the whole system to fit his agenda. The kind of man who thinks if you throw enough paperwork and threats at a person, eventually they'll just roll over and sell. He didn't know I still had those old investigator instincts. Every camera I'd put up, every document I'd kept, every word he'd let slip, I started keeping tabs. By the time this was over, I wanted Greg to regret the day he ever stepped foot on my property. That morning started quiet light coming through the mist over the vines, cool and soft. Everything still wet from the night before. It's the hour I'd moved here for, left 15 years in courtrooms behind for this 5 acres that only ask you for patience, not explanations. My father always said, start early, walk the land, pay attention to the little things. So there I was, boots damp, head clear, until I reached the southern edge of my property and saw the gate swinging open. Not just open, forced. Chain twisted in the dirt, padlock snapped clean in 2. Boot prints in the mud, 3 sets deep. They were carrying something heavy, heading straight for my old barn, the place I kept tools, irrigation controls, the kind of things that make this whole operation run. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to go. I didn't run. Running means panic, and panic means mistakes. So I walked slow, phone already recording video, brain clicking into investigator mode. The prints overlapped 3 men. The direction right for the barn. When I reached them, they were easy to spot. Black polos, HOA security stenciled on the back in block letters. One snapping pictures of the barn, another measuring with a little laser, the third scribbling notes on a clipboard like he was the sheriff. Badge on his belt, cheap plastic, the kind you get online. Font was wrong, county logo pixelated. I'd seen more fake credentials than I could count. I stepped forward, crunch of gravel, loud in the silence. All 3 turned to look at me. Clipboard guy straightened, tried to put on the kind of authority that only works on people who don't know any better. Morning. Routine inspection. You the owner? I kept it cool. I am. You're trespassing. This property's not in any HOA. He smiled, fake as anything. Actually, sir, updated boundary maps put you under Greenfield HOA. We're documenting code violations for the board. You'll get a formal notice in 48 hours. No point arguing with the minions. I pulled out my phone, let him see the camera. I'm recording. Need your names? Your employer and the legal authority for this inspection. Smile slipped. The others started packing up fast, avoiding my eyes. Before they left, clipboard guy stuck a folded piece of paper in my barn door citation for overgrown vegetation and unpermitted structures. 30 days to comply or face further action. And then they vanished through my busted gate like they'd never been there. I waited until their footsteps faded before I touched the citation. Generic printer paper, no official letterhead, no case number. The violations were absurd: grass over 2 inches in non-residential zone, storage building lacking HOA approval. My barn had been there since '98, before the HOA even existed. I stood there a long time, citation in one hand, phone in the other, sun rising higher, burning off the mist. Something in me shifted. The quiet was gone, replaced by that old familiar itch, like when you realize a case is just starting to crack open. When you see that the surface problem is only the tip of something deeper. I went inside, secured the video, photographed the citation, studied every line. Then I dug out my deed and survey maps. Everything said the same thing. My land was never part of Greenfield HOA, never had been. Someone was lying, and not by mistake, lying with a plan. My father always said land doesn't lie. People do, systems do. The land just waits for you to defend it. And suddenly I realized all those years fighting fraud in other people's names, I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The fight, it turned out, had come looking for me. The coffee cooled in my hand. I watched the sunlight crawl across the vines. Somewhere someone thought they could shake me down. They made their first move at dawn, betting I'd fold. What they didn't know was I'd been building my own case since the minute I saw that snapped lock. Greg Lawson arrived 2 days later, right on cue. I was pruning the northeast rows, the sun hot on my neck, when I heard the rumble of a big sedan. Black shiny parked right at my front gate. He had 2 young guys with him, suits, sunglasses, bodyguards, or maybe just the intimidation squad. Greg emerged, last silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who looks like he belongs in a boardroom, not in the dust of a vineyard. He waited by his car, arms folded, watching me approach. Didn't so much as flinch in the heat. When I got close, he smiled, stuck out his hand like we were old friends. Ethan Mercer, I presume. Greg Lawson, president of Greenfield HOA. I hope my team didn't cause too much disruption the other morning. Routine inspections, you know, but I thought we should meet face to face, clear up any confusion. I didn't shake his hand. Crossed my arms, kept my mouth shut. The smile on his face tightened. "I'll be direct," he said. "According to county boundary reassessments, your property is now under our oversight, meaning you're subject to our guidelines, fees, maintenance standards. I've brought the paperwork." One of the suits stepped forward, handed me a leather folder. I flipped it open, looked official county seals, diagrams, legal-sounding language. But the seal was off, too crisp, too clean. Paper was too new. These weren't county docs, they were fakes, but done well. I handed the folder back. County records are public, I checked. No reassessment since 2012. Greg's smile slipped for a moment, irritation flickering in his eyes. Perhaps their online system isn't updated. Bureaucracy, you know how it is, but I assure you the changes are legitimate. He leaned in. Frankly, whether you accept it or not doesn't change your obligations. Bring your property into compliance. That barn's not up to code. I let him keep talking, gave him rope. What code? Architectural standards. Visual cohesion. The structure's an eyesore. Needs to be renovated or removed. The citation outlines your timeline. He stared at me, trying to break me. Work with us, pay the fees, make adjustments, or things get complicated. We have legal teams, county connections. Think about how much this fight is worth to you. I didn't blink. I'll review the paperwork with my attorney. If the county says it's legit, we'll talk. Until then, stay off my land. His face hardened, mask slipping. I'd advise against making this adversarial. You're one man with a small vineyard. We have resources. He turned his men following. As they drove off, I stood there, folder in hand, jaw tight. He'd just threatened me with county inspectors, not a guess a threat. Inside, I pulled the documents apart. Seal was a scan, not embossed. Signature on the assessor's line didn't match the real one. And the date's supposed to be March, but the assessor was on medical leave that whole month. I did some digging. Greenfield HOA set up 6 years ago, but Greg only took over 8 months back. Before that, 2 other states, a property management business in Nevada expired, and a civil lawsuit in Arizona, fraud, abuse of authority, all settled out of court. No charges, but enough smoke for me. And after Greg took over here, 3 families near the HOA's edge moved out in 2 months. Homes sold way below value. Found 2 of them online. Message said I was a former investigator working a property dispute. One replied, "Fast, Rachel." She and her husband had gotten hit with violations, lawn height, fence color, tree placement. Fees, complaints, even environmental code citations. County got involved, but fighting it cost too much. They left drained. She wrote, "He wanted our land." Never said it, but we knew. Be careful. It clicked. Greg wasn't enforcing rules. He was manufacturing crises, using fake authority and corrupt officials to push people out, then scooping up their land, cheap, flipping it to developers. Simple, brutal, illegal. Checked recent land sales. 2 out of 3 forced sellers' homes now owned by Greenview Properties, LLC. Registered agent Greg Lawson. That was the game. Expand fake HOA boundaries, harass owners, buy through a shell company profit. He'd threatened me with county inspectors, meant he had an inside man, needed to prove it. That afternoon, the county emailed me formal complaint for illegal water usage, possible contamination, filed by Environmental Officer Barry Hutchkins. Name sounded new, but I'd bet Greg knew him. I forwarded it to Rachel. She replied, "Yes, same guy signed off on our violations." Looked legit, but we gave up. There it was, Greg's inside man. I made a new file, every encounter, every citation, every lie. I wasn't just defending the vineyard anymore. I was building a case, and I knew exactly how to win it. The attack came from every direction at once. First, it was online. 2 days after Greg left my driveway, I checked my business page and saw a flood of one-star reviews. All of them dropped within 12 hours. Same phrases, same accusations. Unsafe conditions, rude owner, contaminated water. Not a single one was real. No profile pictures, no posting history, just shells set up to destroy my reputation with a click. By noon, 3 bookings had canceled. By sundown, 5 more. A corporate client bailed, $6,000 gone. The review platform's response was robotic. We'll investigate within 5 to 7 business days. I knew what that meant. By then, the damage would stick. I sat at my desk, scrolling the fakes, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This wasn't random. This was sabotage, pure and calculated, just the next phase in the siege. Then came the county. The morning after the review blitz, a young inspector showed up, clipboard bored eyes, handed me a notice of complaint, said I'd been reported for chemical runoff, groundwater contamination. He wanted to see the irrigation storage shed waste methods. So I walked him through everything. Permits in order, chemicals, only the basics organic, all labeled and documented. He found nothing but wrote a citation anyway, potential environmental hazards, inadequate containment protocols, vague as fog designed to stick. I challenged him. He just shrugged. Just following procedure. You can appeal to the board, but it takes 6 weeks. 6 weeks. With an open violation on my record. 6 weeks where customers see that and walk away. He left me with a pile of paperwork. On the complaint reporting party anonymous. Reviewing officer Barry Hutchkins. Greg's inside man. It didn't stop. 2 days later, the building inspector came. Someone had reported unpermitted construction. The barn, the same barn that stood since '98. I showed him the old permits, yellowed but valid, county stamped. He nodded, then wrote up a citation anyway. Permits need to be updated every 20 years for structures over 500 square feet, your past deadline. That wasn't a rule when this was built, I told him. It is now, he said. 60 days to file renewal or face fines. He handed me another stack of forms, drove off. I stood in the driveway, wind tugging at the papers, and felt the walls closing in. Every complaint, every inspection, every citation. It was all building a paper trail, making me look like a serial violator, poisoning my business and my name. That night I reviewed security footage, every camera running since the break-in. At first, nothing. Then I spotted a glitch in the feed from 3 nights ago, a 15-second gap where the timestamp skipped. Someone had tampered with the system. Next morning I walked the perimeter, found 2 tiny boxes disguised as electrical covers on the fence line. Inside surveillance cameras, pro-grade serial numbers filed off, angled right at my house and barn. Somebody was watching me recording. Me had been for days. I didn't remove them. I left them set up my own cameras aimed back. If they wanted surveillance, I'd let them see me documenting everything they did. The pressure didn't let up. A week later, a sheriff's deputy knocked at my door. A noise complaint said I'd been running machinery at 2 a.m. I'd been asleep at 2 a.m. Showed him the footage. No activity, no noise, not a peep. He looked sheepish, but said if it happens again, I'll have to issue a formal warning. Another mark on the invisible record. Another piece of paper for their stack. It was bureaucracy as a weapon, wear you down, drown you in process, force you to fold. That afternoon, I called Claudia Brennan, an old colleague, a real estate attorney with a reputation for gutting corrupt HOAs. She'd taken on the big ones and won. I laid it all out, the fake citations, forged boundary maps, coordinated harassment planted cameras. She listened, didn't interrupt, just the steady tapping of her pen. Finally, she said, "This is textbook extortion. If he's got a county inspector, that's conspiracy, abuse of office. But we need hard evidence. Documents, testimony, recordings. Can you get that? I've got 2 families who'll talk. Forged paperwork. Footage. What I don't have is Greg admitting intent." She said, "Then we set a trap. Make him think you're breaking. Offer to negotiate. Get him talking. Arrogant people always incriminate themselves." I leaned back, looked out over the vineyard. The grapes were swelling season close to its peak. My father used to say patience is the only real skill in farming. Same in building a case. Trust the process. Claudia was right. Greg's arrogance would be his downfall. I'll reach out, I said. Let him think he's won. Claudia came by the next morning, practical sedan leather briefcase, tired but sharp. We spread the forged docs across my table. She moved through them, fast, fake, seal mismatched signatures, digital instead of embossed. None of this would hold up in court. The map's fabricated seals, a digital copy, assessor's signature as a fake guy was on medical leave when this was supposedly filed. He's left a trail. I asked about the inspector. Claudia popped open her laptop. Barry Hutchkins, environmental compliance. 12 years clean record until 8 months ago when the complaint started. 3 families all on the HOA's boundary. All cited, all dismissed or overturned after the damage was done. 2 sold, 1 still fighting. He's the linchpin. I told her about the water contamination complaint, Barry's signature. She nodded. That helps. But we need a pattern. Phone records, emails, financials, anything that links them. I asked about the families who'd sold. Claudia checked her notes. 1 kept everything, citations, emails, phone recordings. She'll testify. It felt like something was shifting, like all the puzzle pieces were finally snapping together. We have enough to file, I asked. Claudia shook her head. We can prove harassment. We can nail the inspector. But we can't prove Greg's intent. He never says it outright. We need him to say it to you on the record. That's when I told her my plan played defeated offer to negotiate, get Greg to talk. One-party consent state, Claudia reminded me. You're good to record, but don't push. Just let him talk. I nodded. He's arrogant. He'll gloat. He always does. She stood gathering her papers. The moment you get that recording, we go nuclear. Complaint to the prosecutor, ethics board, bar association. We bury him in his own words. After she left, I sat by the window. Vines heavy with fruit, sunset painting the rose gold. Harvest in 2 weeks. Timing is everything my father used to say. Pick too soon and the fruit sour too late and it rots. Same with a case. Move too soon, evidence isn't ready. Wait too long, target vanishes. I drafted an email, Greg. I've been thinking about your offer. This fight's costing me more than it's worth. Let's meet and discuss terms. I read it 3 times before sending. His reply was instant. Glad you're being reasonable. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Main Street Coffee. Let's settle this like adults. I forwarded it to Claudia. It's happening. Then spent the night prepping. Charged my phone, tested the recorder, mapped out the questions. I rehearsed letting Greg do all the talking. That night I walked the vineyard. The air was cool, clear. I checked the hidden cameras on Greg's surveillance boxes. The feeds were recording just like I wanted. Greg thought people wouldn't fight back. He bet on exhaustion, on people breaking. But he'd underestimated me. Tomorrow I'd play the beaten man, let him feel in control. And in return he'd hand me the rope to hang him. Main Street Coffee was neutral territory, public quiet enough to talk, busy enough for nobody to try anything stupid. I got there 15 minutes early, picked a table by the window, ordered black coffee I didn't plan to drink. My phone was already recording, microphone tested. I'd dressed the part, worn jeans, faded shirt boots, scuffed from the field. I wanted to look beat tired like a man who'd lost. At 2 p.m. sharp, Greg walked in. Alone, no enforcers this time. He wore business casual pressed slacks, a polo loafers that cost more than some folks' rent. He found me right away, slid into the seat across from me without asking, folded his hands on the table. Ethan, I appreciate you reaching out. Shows maturity, shows you understand how these things work. I slouched back, eyes heavy. I can't keep fighting. The citations, the reviews, the county. It's killing my business. I just want it to end. He nodded like he was sympathetic. I respect that. I want you to know this was never personal. Just business. The community has standards. The county has regulations. I enforce them. But I'm not unreasonable. If you work with me, we can find a solution. I ran a hand over my face. What kind of solution? He leaned in, lowering his voice. Simple. You transfer ownership of 40% of your property to the HOA. We call it an easement community green space. You keep the rest, keep running your vineyard, but you agree to our guidelines. In exchange, all the complaints disappear. Citations vanish. You get your piece. I stared into my coffee, quiet a long moment. 40%. That's almost 2 acres. He shrugged. It's fair compensation for the disruption you've caused. Honestly, it's generous. Most lose everything. I studied him careful to let my face show defeat, not anger. What if I say no? His smile didn't move, but his eyes did, cold calculating. Then the problems continue. More inspections, more complaints, more citations. You'll spend a year fighting, losing money, losing bookings until you have to sell. And by then, your land's worth half what it is now. Nobody wants a property with an environmental violation and a stack of code complaints. I let the silence drag just long enough. What's in it for you? You're HOA president, not a developer. He hesitated, then arrogance took over, just like Claudia predicted. Let me be honest, the land around here is about to explode in value. Resort development coming in high-end exclusive turns, rural acreage into million-dollar parcels. Developers need contiguous land, clean titles, properties not tied up by small owners. That's where I come in. I consolidate, smooth the legal headaches, and sell at a premium. Everybody wins. He sat back looking proud. Your land's right in the middle. If I secure it along with the others I've already got, it's a 7-figure payout for me, maybe more. My pulse hammered. He'd just given up everything, motive method, the whole conspiracy. I pressed on careful. The county inspector, Barry, the one signing off on my violations, he's in on this too. Greg barely blinked. Barry's helpful, yes. Understands how the system works. A few well-timed complaints inspections create pressure. Desperate people make bad decisions like trying to keep land they can't afford. Barry gets a finder's fee. Nothing extravagant. It's mutually beneficial. I tried to keep my hands steady. So all of this, the boundary maps, citations, HOA expansion, it's just a setup. Force people out, flip the land. He smiled that practiced, empty charm. I wouldn't say fake, I'd say creative. The system has loopholes. I use them. That's not illegal, that's smart. His tone shifted almost fatherly. Look, you're not the first, won't be the last. The difference is I'm giving you a choice. Take the deal, keep half, walk away clean. Or fight, lose everything. Your call. I nodded quiet, looking at the table. I need time. He stood, slid a business card across the wood. 48 hours. Then I move forward. You don't want that. He walked out smooth as ever. I waited until his car pulled away before stopping the recording. My hands shook not from fear, but from adrenaline. I listened back, his voice cold and clear, laying out the whole scheme. Conspiracy, bribery, manufactured legal pressure. All of it admissible in court. I forwarded the file to Claudia. We have him. Her reply was instant. Meet me at my office in an hour. We're filing tonight. I paid for the coffee, stepped into the afternoon sun, the weight I'd been carrying for weeks, finally starting to lift. Greg thought he'd won, that he'd broken me. He had no clue I'd been counting every word, every crime, every confession. Back home, I made copies, one on a USB, one in the cloud, one hidden on a hard drive. I organized every scrap, fake document, surveillance footage, testimony from the other families' county records, now the confession. That night, Claudia and I drafted the complaints, one to the county prosecutor for conspiracy and extortion, one to the state ethics board for public corruption, one to the bar association, one to the press. We worked late, triple-checking every line, every reference. When we finished, the case was airtight, the kind of file that ends careers and opens investigations. Claudia looked across her desk, tired but fierce. Once we submit, there's no going back. They'll come at you hard. Greg will lawyer up. County will circle the wagons. Are you ready? I thought about my father's vineyard. The families forced out the slow grind of a system built to break people like us. I've been ready since the day they broke my lock. She nodded, hit send. The complaints went out in a flurry of digital receipts, time-stamped, logged. Within hours, the gears of justice would start turning. Investigators would be assigned. Subpoenas issued. Greg Lawson's empire was about to crumble. I drove home under a sky full of stars, vineyards stretching out in the dark, and felt a kind of certainty I hadn't known in years. Not relief, not triumph. Just the cold clarity of knowing I'd done the right thing, even if it cost me everything. The wheels started turning even faster than I expected. Claudia called at 6 a.m., not even 2 days after we filed. Her voice was sharp, energized in a way I'd only ever heard when a case was breaking open for real. The prosecutor's office just issued a warrant, she said. They're serving it this morning. State Attorney General's office is involved. This isn't just local anymore. I was already up mug in hand watching the Vineyard catch fire in the sunrise, where the HOA office, she said. I figured you'd want to see it for yourself. I didn't plan on getting too close. Didn't need to. But I wanted to witness it to feel that confirmation that sometimes the system can still work if you shove enough evidence under its nose. I parked 2 blocks away across from the bakery, kept my head down, just another early riser with coffee to go. The HOA building was small, tucked between a tax place and a real estate office. At 7:30, 3 unmarked sedans glided up. 6 people stepped out, 4 in suits, 2 in uniform. They moved with that quiet, efficient authority that tells you this isn't their first raid. No drama, no shouting, no lights, no sirens. They walked in with briefcases and cameras. 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and out came Greg Lawson, flanked by 2 investigators. No handcuffs, not yet, but the color had drained from his face. He looked lost, like a man who'd just realized the ground under him wasn't ground at all. I watched as they led him to a car. Then the officer started hauling out boxes, computers, paper files, everything that might hide a trace, a deal, a signature. The whole operation took less than half an hour. Neat, surgical, no fireworks. As I watched, my phone buzzed. Text from Claudia County Inspector just arrested at his home. Both in custody, press conference at noon. I just replied, good. Then I drove home because there was always more to do on the land. And anyway, standing around watching a man's world fall apart felt like bad karma, even if he deserved it. By noon, the news was everywhere. Local stations ran the story, first corruption allegations, Rock Greenfield, HOA. By sunset, it was in regional media. Headlines blared, HOA president, county official arrested in land scheme. I watched the coverage from my couch, volume low, feeling an odd kind of emptiness. It wasn't joy, more like the end of a long-held breath. The next day would be a new fight. The phone rang all afternoon, reporters mostly. Claudia had told me not to talk. Let the evidence speak. Don't give them a soundbite to twist. So I stayed quiet, let the machine roll. 3 days later, Claudia called again, voice lighter this time. The inspector flipped. He's cooperating, emails, bank records, recordings. He's cutting a deal, testifying for a reduced sentence. Didn't surprise me. Guys like that always fold under pressure. I asked, what about the third man, the board chair? She hesitated. They're building a case, but he's slipperier. Political connections. But they'll get him. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Instinct said, let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won. A smooth, practiced voice. Mr. Mercer, this is Thomas Wright, County Board Chair. I think we should talk. I didn't say a word. Let the silence hang. He filled it. I want you to know I had no direct knowledge of Greg Lawson's actions. I was not involved in any improper activities. I understand this has been difficult for you, and I want to help resolve it amicably. Still, I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. The county will issue a formal apology. Clear. Your records compensate you for legal fees and lost revenue. All we ask is you refrain from making any further public statements. I let that hang too. Then, so you're offering me money to stay quiet? There was a pause. I am offering a reasonable resolution. Litigation is expensive, drawn out. Frankly, continuing this publicly damages the community. We both want what's best for the county, don't we? I almost laughed. Instead, I said flat, no. I want what's legal, what's right. If you weren't involved, you have nothing to worry about. If you were, no settlement's going to save you. Long silence. Then his tone changed, harder, colder. You should be careful, Mr. Mercer. You're making enemies. People with long memories. I hung up, forwarded the call log and recording to Claudia witness intimidation. Add it to the file. Her reply was immediate on it. Life went on like it always does after the storm passes. But something in me had shifted. Not just the land or the work, but the knowledge that systems built on lies can't last. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just patience evidence and the stubborn refusal to quit. Greg was in custody. The inspector was cooperating. The board chair had just threatened a witness on a recorded line. The walls were closing in and not around me. Claudia called, "We're ready for the press conference. You up for it?" I paused. "Yeah, let's do it." She said people need to hear the story, not just read it in the filings. They need to see the pattern, how it started, how it ends. We held the press conference at the community center neutral ground, big enough for media residents. Everyone who'd heard whispers and wanted the truth. I arrived early. Claudia was already there, prepping the projector, setting up evidence binders. Two of the forced-out families stood near the front, nervous but standing tall. By 10, the room was packed, reporters, neighbors, even a few folks from other towns. I stood at the podium, Claudia beside me, and took a breath. The weight of all those eyes settled heavy, but there was no backing down. I told the story, just the facts, no drama. Timeline, evidence, how Greg took over the HOA, targeted properties, faked violations, weaponized county officials, forced sales through his shell company, and pocketed the profit. Claudia projected the forged documents, boundary maps, citations, recordings. She played Greg's confession. His voice echoed through the room, cold, arrogant, undeniable. When it finished, the silence was deep. Then I introduced the families. They spoke quietly, but with a kind of strength that comes from surviving hell. They told of endless inspections, mounting fines, phone calls, threatening more. One man's voice cracked as he described selling his home for half its value just to escape. The crowd changed curiosity to anger, to resolve. You could feel it. Claudia wrapped up, explained the charges, the lawsuits, the reforms we'd be demanding. Stricter audits for HOAs, oversight for county inspectors, public access to all citations. She was clinical, precise. She'd done this before, and it showed. Reporters started shouting. How much did Greg make? Will the board chair be charged? What happens to the families? Claudia handled every question with cool patience. I watched the back of the room, saw a group of HOA board members huddled together, shocked, a few in tears. Maybe they felt betrayed, maybe complicit. It didn't matter. The system was broken, and now it was being rebuilt in public. Afterward, residents came up, some wanting to share their own stories, some just to say thank you. I answered what I could, redirected the rest to Claudia, did my best not to show how tired I was. By noon, the hall had cleared. Claudia and I packed up. She looked at me. You know this isn't over. Lawyers will fight. County will try to contain it. I nodded, yeah. But they can't hide it now. Evidence is public. They can't make it vanish. She smiled just a little. No, they can't. We walked out into the midday sun. My phone buzzed, news outlets running stories, social media lighting up the hashtag trending. The story had a life of its own now. That was good. Systems only change when the corruption gets dragged into the light. That evening, the prosecutor called. Update on the case, Greg's bail denied. Inspector pled guilty, testifying. Board chair investigation is expanding, emails, financials, a pattern going back years. We're building a RICO case. I hung up, heart pounding. RICO meant they were treating this as organized crime, which in a way it was. Organized, systematic, designed to squeeze honest folks for profit. 2 days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting. The whole board resigned. New elections were scheduled. First act of the interim board, formal apology to me, to the families, to the whole community. They dissolved. All expanded boundary claims restored the real jurisdiction and officially removed my land from their oversight. It didn't undo what was lost, but it was a start. A public admission that something had gone deeply wrong. I framed that apology, hung it above my desk. Not for pride, just a reminder. Power always tries to slip past scrutiny. Only vigilance and persistence hold it in check. The land was quiet that night. Harvest was finished, barrels full, vines settling in for winter. I sat on the porch, breathed in the dark, and felt something close to peace. Not victory, just a deep, slow relief. The truth had been told. The machine of justice was grinding on. The people who'd abused the system were finally paying a price. That was all anyone could ask. Not perfection, just accountability. The courthouse was smaller than I expected, old stone-high ceilings, creaky benches that made you feel every second pass. I sat in the gallery 3 rows from the front as the judge read the sentences. 4 months had passed since that first dawn raid, 4 months of depositions, plea deals, legal maneuvering, and waiting, but today it was ending. Greg Lawson stood at the defense table, all the arrogance gone. Expensive suit replaced by something off the rack hair, a little thinner, shoulders hunched in a way that said he finally understood. His lawyer tried everything: character witnesses, mitigating circumstances, arguments about intent versus action. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession was clear. Victims had testified. The judge's voice was neutral, but I could hear the steel underneath. Mr. Lawson, you are hereby sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and abuse of legal process. You are fined $500,000 and permanently barred from holding any position of authority within a homeowner association or property management entity. You will also forfeit all assets acquired through the shell company identified in the prosecution's evidence. Greg didn't react, just stared straight ahead as reality settled in. 3 years. License revoked. Property seized. Everything he'd built on threats and lies gone just like that. The county inspector, Barry Hutchkins, had been sentenced the week before, 2 years reduced from 5 because he cooperated. Lost his job, his pension, his name. Last I heard, he moved out of state, trying to fade into obscurity. Didn't much care. Some people just disappear when the light finally hits them. Then there was Thomas Wright, the county board chair. His case had taken the longest, but prosecutors had been patient. Emails proved he'd known. Financial records showed the payments, consulting fees that never matched any real work. Testimony from Barry confirmed that Wright had provided cover-blocked investigations, dismissed complaints. The judge sentenced him to 5 years for corruption and racketeering, the longest sentence of all. Called it a betrayal of public trust. The courtroom was silent as the bailiffs led him out. I left without saying a word. Claudia had offered to meet me for lunch, but I declined. This wasn't a moment for celebration. It was just closure, the last note in a story that had started with a broken lock and ended with 3 men in prison. Driving back the road felt different, familiar but lighter. I let the air in through the windows, tasted autumn in every breath, and for the first time in months I felt like maybe I could let go. The vineyard had changed too. The vines were pruned back for winter branches bare against the sky. The barn had a new lock, a reinforced door, and cameras that now recorded nothing more than sunrises and the occasional deer nosing along the fence. I walked the land that night, boots crunching on gravel, air crisp and damp from last week's rain. Everything smelled like earth and dormancy, the quiet pause before the whole world wakes up again. My father always said, vineyards teach you patience. You can't rush a season, can't force a harvest. You plant, you tend, you wait, and if you do it right, the land gives back. I'd forgotten that during those years chasing fraud and other people's battles, forgotten that some things don't answer to courts or deadlines. Some things just take time. That night I opened a bottle from 2 years back, a red my dad had labeled by hand. I poured a glass, let it catch the lamplight, then stepped onto the porch as the sun bled down over the hills. Orange to violet, the kind of color that makes you believe in order again. I raised my glass, not in triumph, just acknowledgement. To my father, to the families who fought back, to Claudia, to the slow machinery of the law, that if you give it time can still turn toward fairness. A week later, one of the families called. Their house had been restored, restitution offered, apologies made. Others followed, houses coming back, lights filling up the street again. The new HOA board asked if I'd advise them. I turned them down, but sent a list of reforms, audits, public records, term limits, real oversight. They put them in not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Folks finally understood what silence had cost. Spring crept back in slow. The vines budded bright green against all that old wood. The work was the same, patient, steady, but I was different. The vineyard wasn't an escape anymore. It was proof that some things are worth defending. One morning, standing at the edge of the rows, the first sunlight threading the fog, I felt no weight, no fear, just the quiet certainty that the land had survived, and so had I. My phone buzzed. Claudia's text, civil suit settled. Families getting restitution. I texted back, good, then went back to work. The vines didn't care about justice or corruption. They just grew. That was enough. A few days later, I walked to the far end of the property where the boundary meets the old road. The chain was fixed now, the lock solid. The ground was still scarred from all those boots months ago, but the grass was coming back. Funny thing about the earth, it takes a beating, but given enough time, it'll heal itself. There were times I'd wondered if all that fighting was worth it. If maybe Greg was right, maybe it's easier to just sell and move on. But then I'd look at what my father built, the stories buried in these rows, the sweat and hope and memory woven into every vine. That's what they never understood. For people like us, land isn't just money. It's history. It's promise. It's the only thing that outlasts everything. There's still trouble out there. More HOAs, more men like Greg, more schemes. That won't ever change. But this little patch of earth, it's safe for now because somebody fought back and didn't give up. I took one last look at the vineyard sky, wide and blue overhead, and felt something close to peace. The land was quiet, my name was clear, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open. And if anyone out there is listening, if you ever find yourself up against a system that's stacked against you, remember evidence, patience, and the willingness to stand your ground. That's all it takes. Sometimes that's enough. Thanks for hearing my story.